Servers, waiters, waitresses, bartenders, what is the rudest thing a customer has ever done to you? Had a real head trip one night. It was intense. An old man came in by himself, ordered dinner and a drink, about $30. A table of college kids came a few tables away, ordered dinner and apps, about $150. My service to the old guy is sharp, professional, attentive, spot on, all is well. When I ask him how everything was, he's real curt. Fine, nothing, didn't even look at me. He orders another martini, still clear and sober, and stops me. I want you to add those kids' bills to mine anonymously, and I want you to tell them not to pay you or tip you, and I want to hear you say it to them. Still terse, still cold. So, fine, I've been doing this for a decade, I'm cool with whatever. It's weird, but whatevers. The other table is about 5 feet away, across an aisle. I tell them the news, they're psyched. The guy asks for his check. I bring it. For him, 2 drinks, 1 dish, plus the other check equals $185. He hands me a credit card. I ring him up, I bring the paperwork. I place the check holder in front of him, thank him for coming, and begin to walk away, at which point he says, "Wait, I want you to see this." He makes a big show out of signing a big 0 on the tip line, complete with Scandinavian diagonal slash through the oval. Then he looks me straight in the face, stone cold like a cop daring you to say something smart. It had been clear that this guy was weird from the start, so I said in a sincere tone and with proper courtesy, "Have a nice evening, sir," just as I would if he had tipped me appropriately. He stares me in the eye for a fraction of a second, which feels much longer. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out a 50, says, "That's for you." I said, "Thank you." Gets up, puts on his cowboy hat, and walks out. Not a word to the kids whose dinner he just bought, not another word to me. Okay, and the moral of the story is, kids, when working in customer service, never become emotional or react in front of the customer. They may be hiding a 50. Story 2. I have dozens, but I will go with my favorite. I worked in an electronics retail store and was the sales manager. I was helping out on the sales floor when a young couple came in. The guy was probably about 6'5" and just built as can be. They were looking for a new computer, so we started talking about what they were going to use it for. The guy excuses himself to use the restroom, and I keep talking to his wife. A guy in his business suit in his late 30s comes up behind me while I'm still talking, grabs my shoulder and says, "Excuse me, I need your help. Do you have software X in stock?" I told him that I didn't think we did, but that I was in the middle of helping another customer, and he could go check out front if he was in a hurry. I turned back and continued speaking with the lady I was helping. About 2 minutes later, I felt someone grab my arm from behind me and started pulling me backwards. The lady I was helping had a horrified look on her face as I was getting dragged away. I finally spun myself around and realized it was the guy in the business suit dragging me over. He then grabbed me and said, "See, idiot, you have the software in stock and it's right there. I want your manager and I want you fired." I was too dumbfounded to speak for a second. Meanwhile, I see the husband of the lady I had been helping, who was returning from the bathroom, dashing towards me and the customer who had me. He grabbed the guy in the business suit by both arms and whipped him around and against the wall. He put one of his massive hands on the guy's shoulder and pinned him against the wall so he couldn't move, and with his other hand pulled out his police badge. It was pretty awesome. Story 3. I had a family come in for their daughter's birthday with a handful of her friends. They ordered a round of drinks that I promptly brought back to the table. When I gave the father his pint of beer, he requested that I bring his drink back in a frosted mug. It was in a frosted pint glass. I informed him we don't have any mugs in the house, which sent him into a rage. He called me a lying schmuck, flipped the table, breaking several of the gifts, and punched the wall on the way out. This left me, the family, and all of the patrons in a state of shock. The daughter started crying and mother apologizing profusely and said they would pay for the drinks and leave. I tried to be as graceful as I could, suggested they stay as it was still the daughter's birthday, and promised the rest of the night would be great. I got somebody to bring fresh drinks, got help cleaning up the mess, and took their orders. I told the kitchen and management about what happened, and everybody pitched in to make the evening better. Their meals were comped, and I made a dessert bonanza for the daughter. By the end of the meal, it was as if the father was never there. Story 4. Punched me in the chest because the restaurant was crowded and his dinner took too long to get to him. I was in college, I was 21 years old and a very thin young woman at the time. I went down like a ton of bricks, dropped the tray of food I was carrying, and wiped out a whole table that some other family was sitting at. Happened so fast, I didn't know what happened. Several male customers charged the guy and threw him against a wall. He was arrested. The manager made sure I was okay, small beach, bar, restaurant, and then set me up at the bar with free drinks. Story 5. I was working as a waitress at a pizza place during high school. The manager for the store would hire mentally challenged people to wash dishes and bus tables during the weekends. One weekend we were swamped and things were getting a bit crazy. A woman with 4 or 5 kids was sitting close to the waitress station. It wasn't my table, but I could tell she looked angry. One of the mentally challenged workers, we'll call her Jane, was walking by her as she was bussing tables. The woman grabbed Jane's arm and swung her around. She yelled at her for not bringing out the appetizer or something. I walked over to the woman, told her that Jane was not one of the wait staff members, and asked what I could get for her. She then got out of her chair and screamed, "Frickin' idiots!" She walked off, probably to talk to the manager. I was speechless. I felt horrible. I don't think the woman knew what she had just said. Then one of the kids, she had to have been younger than 8, told me, "Sorry about my mommy, she is mean." I told her, "It's not your fault," and patted her on the head. The woman came back to grab her kids and coat and left the restaurant. It was busy, and unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to tell the woman that her daughter was more grown up than she was. It wasn't the rudest thing done to me, but it was definitely the rudest thing I have ever heard a customer say in all of my waitressing experience. Story 6. One night, my manager and I had just finished cleaning up our sub sandwich shop. He had his hand on the door lock when a woman desperately ran up, screaming, "Wait, wait!" My manager gave me the most apologetic look and let her in. We then had to unwrap all the sandwich making materials, which involved pulling saran wrap off of everything, refilling sanitation sinks to wash any dirty dishes, basically completely redoing all of our closing procedures. The woman ordered around 10 sandwiches for 10 different people. It sounded like it was for a party or something. For each separate sandwich, she had to talk to a different person, shouting into her cell phone and breaking into random bits of other conversations, while my manager and I stood there trying to get information on what to put on the sandwiches. All in all, we finished her sandwiches about 25 minutes later and then waited another 10 minutes for her to finish her phone call and come up to the register to pay. Of course, she only had a $100 bill, which we didn't have proper change for. It was now 35 minutes after we closed. She became exasperated and difficult about having to use her credit card. Finally, we got everything sorted out, and she gathered up her sandwiches, looked at the clock overhead, and said in the most condescending voice I've ever heard, "Don't you think you guys could have made my sandwiches a bit quicker? Now I've missed 10 minutes of X TV show. No tip for you," and then she walked out the door. It took us another 20 minutes or so to redo all of our closing procedures. My manager felt so bad about being the one who let her in that he gave me the entire share of the evening's tips. Usually they're split 50-50. Still, people like that lady make me so glad I don't work in food service anymore. Story 7. I don't really have specific stories, but my dad owns a sushi restaurant, and occasionally when he's low on people, I'll come in and help out as a server. Since it's a pretty classy joint, there's plenty of really rich folks who come in and know my dad, who was one of the sushi chefs behind the sushi bar. Anyhow, the really rich people are typically super snobby and treat the servers like dirt while being all chummy with my dad and with the other owner and chef. I got a good amount of, "Hey you, give me more champagne." No please, no thank you, just rude. The most annoying part is that every time my dad mentions that I'm his son, their demeanor does a complete 180 and now all of a sudden I'm their buddy and they've known me forever and they're always so grateful when I get them refills on their frickin' champagne. It's like, crap man, I'm not just my dad's offspring, I'm also a human being, but you wouldn't be able to tell with the way these people treat others. Story 8. A family of 4 comes in and the dad starts slamming lagers. He probably had 4 or 5 beers before they got their appetizers. The couple wasn't particularly rude to me, but were a little rough around the edges in general. Loud, blunt, not very good manners, etc. The 2 daughters, probably 8 and 10, were really quiet though, and I could see why pretty quickly. As the dad got more and more intoxicated, he was really touchy with the girls, made them sit on his lap, etc. They were visibly uncomfortable. I felt so terrible for them. Anyways, I brought one of the appetizer dishes out, but the other one was potato skins or something that takes a little longer to cook, which I alerted them of when they ordered. The dad gets mad, saying that the appetizers need to come out together, blah 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 blah. I get what he means, but still, you have one thing to munch on for 4 people too, and what's the big deal? The dad is yelling at me, "This is BS," pointing at me, calling me a terrible server, while the daughters and moms sort of stare at their laps. He asks to see my manager, and I go to get her. The other waitresses on the shift have seen what's been going on with this guy, and already told my manager about the schmuck. My manager comes out to talk to the guy, and he is furious that there isn't a male boss available. He's spewing gems like, "Are you kidding? I need to speak with a man about this. You're telling me that the only manager here is her?" I've never dealt with such a creepy, sexist, insulting, crude person before. Yes, he made me cry, and I will never understand what people get out of making an 18-year-old girl cry. It was a nightmare. Story 9. So I was working for a company that sells birthday crap and Halloween costumes as a supervisor. A lady called in and was escalated to me and literally told her kids while I was on the phone with her to get a good education so you don't end up working in customer service someday. I handle this by conducting the entire rest of the conversation in legalese and by using the highest level of vocabulary I am capable of. She wasn't exceptionally bright, as you may have gathered, since she insulted someone with her credit card number and all related details, and wasn't able to understand what I was saying. It wasn't even too extreme. Probably the most complicated term I used was fiduciary capacity. She explained that she was confused by the terms I was using, so I suddenly went to be extremely patronizing and asked if perhaps there was someone there that might be better able to understand the nuances of returning an order, like perhaps your husband or a parent. Do you have any neighbors that might be able to explain things to you, or perhaps a social worker? Mortified the crap out of her in front of her kids as she was on speakerphone. I'd also like to add that you should all get a good education so you don't end up working in customer service. Story 10. I worked in a cafe on the Jersey Shore a few years ago during the summer when the summer people, aka the Guidos from Staten Island, came. One of them, a nice-looking woman with a horrible Staten Island accent, came in and asked me about her sandwiches. She wanted to know if they were paninis. I said that we press them on a panini grill, but the bread is just sub bread, not the kind normally used for a panini. So it's like a panini? She asked. I said yes, and when she got her sandwich, she opened it up and literally threw it at me and started screaming to speak to a manager. When he came out, she told him that I had lied to her and told her it was a panini, and she refused to pay and wanted me fired. The manager just quietly told her to get out of his store. Story 11. So this isn't quite the rudest, maybe the funniest. I used to work at this cafe that had this spinach salad with a hot bacon dressing. The dressing was so repulsive looking. It came in a huge tub and it looked like a spicy, greasy gel that we put in the microwave for about 2 minutes until it had a nice film on top. Then we gave it to the customer in this side monkey bowl and they poured it on top. Anyway, one day this huge fat guy, at least 400 pounds, comes in and sits at one of my tables. He orders like 3 substances off the bat and the spinach salad with hot bacon dressing. I guess he was on a diet. So as I am pretty busy with other tables, I try to economize time by running his dressing over about a minute before the cook puts his salad in the window. When I swing back by literally 2 minutes later to drop off the salad, I notice the dressing bowl is empty. In shock, I kind of just put the salad down and didn't say anything. As I'm walking away, he screams out to me full volume in the little cafe, "Waitress, where the hell is my dressing?" And he slams his fist on the table like Jabba the Hutt or something. I walk back over to him and I just say, "Sir, you ate it." He retorts, "I thought that was my soup." I say, "You didn't order any soup." He's so angry, he's turning totally red and breathing like a dragon, and then he screams, "Well, bring me double that for my salad." I bring it later, and later I spy him drinking some like soup again. Story 12. Wow, too many stories, but this is my favorite. In addition to years in the food service industry, I owned and operated a bed and breakfast in a small town in South Carolina. It was a small business with just 3 rooms and an old farmhouse built in 1835. During the off-season, late fall through mid-spring, we would donate 3-day packages to charity events like auctions. We were never in charge of the money collected. We simply aimed to do a good deed and perhaps generate some positive word of mouth. So, a man and his wife booked for a weekend in late March. They arrived on Friday afternoon with their gift certificate from a charity auction, which we gladly accepted. I greeted them saying, "You must be Mr. and Mrs. name," to which the guy responded, "It's Pastor name." Immediately, I thought, oh no. I showed them their room, informed them of our policies, and explained that another couple would be arriving that evening. The next morning, I served both couples breakfast. After the other couple left, the pastor said to me, "I don't think it's a good idea to have more than one couple here at a time. Why did you schedule us both?" I explained that we operate like a hotel. It's not feasible for us to only book one room at a time. He then proceeded to tell me that he had discovered the other couple was not married, and he was bothered by the idea that we would promote immorality. It gets so much better. We have a large farm with wonderful little gardens and nice spots to sit and enjoy the countryside. I walked out onto the grounds and found the pastor sitting on a plastic folding chair, they must have brought them, directly in front of the farmhouse entrance. I simply wondered about it but didn't say anything. Later that night, the lady from the other couple came to my door and told me they were leaving because the pastor had blocked their entrance to the house and began to preach to them about being immoral. I apologized and offered almost everything I could think of, but this lady was genuinely nice and told me that she knew it wasn't my fault, but the weekend was ruined. I actually gave her another weekend for free and they returned about a month later. Again, it gets even better. The next morning, I was preparing breakfast and saw the pastor putting their luggage in their car. They had another night left, so I was a bit confused. I walked out to the driveway and said, "I think maybe there's a misunderstanding. You have another night." To which he replied, "Your air conditioning is broken, so we are leaving." I told him I could check on it, but it might just not be on since it was only in the 60s. In fact, the heat might be on. He looked at me and said, "No, it was too hot last night, and you should have known that. I want my money back." For some reason, I was still trying to keep the whole thing friendly, so I explained to him that I hadn't received any money from him and that the certificate he used was from a charity auction, so I wasn't even sure what he had paid. He responded, "Well, I paid $110 and I didn't pay that to sleep in a hot room next to sinners, so you better write a check." Oh my goodness, I told him that I would not be issuing a check since one night at our regular rate was $100, making his nightly rate less than one-third of that, and I hadn't received any of that money. I walked back inside and began to shut down breakfast preparations. About 5 minutes later, he came back to the door and said, "We'll be taking our breakfast and my check now." I explained to him that I would be happy to put his breakfast in a box, but I was not giving him any money. They left, and there was a letter in his room addressed to me telling me that he was going to call his lawyer. 2 weeks later, I received a package in the mail with their name on the return address. I was both scared and intrigued to open it. It was a letter from his wife, whom I hadn't heard more than 2 words from during their trip, apologizing profusely for her husband's behavior. She told me that she knew I hadn't done anything wrong, that the room was perfectly lovely, there was no issue with the heat, and that her husband has become a fundamentalist born-again Christian a few years ago, became a minister online, and since then he had been a complete terror. She included $200 in cash and asked that I not contact her as she was in the middle of trying to get legally separated from him. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 13. This didn't happen to me, but to my coworker Alan. He was waiting on a couple at the steak restaurant where we worked. Suddenly, the man at the table stood up, clutching his throat. He was clearly choking, turning different colors, and desperately in need of help. Alan immediately began performing the Heimlich maneuver. After several attempts, some steak dislodged, and the man could breathe again. It was quite a spectacle, and both customers and staff were shaken for a few minutes. The wife of the man who choked then asked Alan to box up the uneaten portion of their meals. There was a crust of Texas toast left on the plate that Alan apparently didn't remember to include in their to-go box. The woman yelled at him for not including it and did not leave a tip. Story 14. I was working at this one restaurant when this table came in. It was a nice-looking family of 4. The parents ordered a sizzling fajita plate for 2. When I brought out the fajitas on the iron skillet plate, they were sizzling like they are supposed to be. Well, apparently that wasn't hot enough. They asked me to go back and make them hotter, so I take it back to the kitchen where the kitchen manager decides to pull out a damn blowtorch. Why he needed or had this thing is beyond me. He proceeds to heat the iron skillet up to burning red, then throws the fajitas back on the skillet and sends me back out with them to the table. Well, the father at the table was not very pleased with the profuse amounts of smoke billowing from the plate on his table and decided to throw the thing at me. Luckily, he had a bad aim, missed, and just broke a window. The manager got his information and was told to get out, and we would be contacting him about replacement of the window he broke. Story 15. These 3 girls came in a few hours before our dining area was closed. They were all in their 20s and looked quite particular. I take my job pretty seriously, and despite having just finished a long day, I worked diligently for a good 2 hours, getting them drinks and food. I was very kind to them, tried to crack a few jokes and make them feel at home. As it neared the last half hour, I informed the girls, all of whom seemed intoxicated, that our dining area was closing and they were welcome to move to the bar. Half an hour later, I realized they had no intention of doing so. So as the cook left and the lights were dimmed, it was just me watching these girls and bringing them drinks. At this point, it was about 11:30 p.m. and I was tired, but we're expected to stay and serve until the last group leaves. Around this time, the 3 girls were joined by 2 more friends who promptly ordered drinks despite the fact that we had already closed the dining area. Finally, the girls called me over and said they were ready to pay. Their bill was around $50 and they paid with a credit card. When I got the receipt back from them, next to the tip line was written 45 cents. I was so furious I wanted to confront them all. I had no idea why they would treat me that way all night, only to give me a clear and direct insult with their tip. I expect that kind of thing from kids who only have a few quarters in their pockets, but I don't expect that kind of behavior from 5 individuals in their 20s with credit cards and designer purses. Story 16. Not a waitress, but I served coffee for 8 years in various establishments, which taught me that coffee is a serious fixation. I began to feel dirty, especially in the morning because the customers that came in so obviously needed their fix and were total schmucks until the coffee kicked in. Customers that yelled at me at the till would smile and wish me a good day on the way out. Story 17. Okay, love this experience. I was working in the lumber department at Builder Square, a now defunct home improvement chain. I was all of 18 or 19 years old. Anyway, if any of you had experience lifting a solid core front door, you know that they are pretty damn heavy. I was on the 2nd-story rack standing on the forklift forks trying to manhandle one of these doors out of the rack and bring it down to the floor level for a customer. About the time I have this door halfway out of the rack, precariously maneuvering it onto the forks, a little old lady walks up and asks sweetly, "Excuse me, sir, can you point me to the plumbing section?" I replied with, grunting because the door was heavy, "One moment, ma'am, let me get this door down and I'll show you." Her response, "You frickin' idiots never have a frickin' product labeled right. I'm tired of this store's crap. Way too frickin' expensive too." I'm frozen, staring at her with my mouth agape. The original customer I was helping actually put his hands over his son's ears. Jekyll and Hyde personified. But hooray for perfect timing. Right when the old biddy started her tirade, my manager happened to have walked by. He stopped, walked right up to the lady, and said, "I don't care who you are, but no one deserves to be talked like that. Leave the store now." Story 18. I was waiting tables at a popular steakhouse in the South when a six-top was seated in my section. There was an older couple sitting nearest me and two younger couples. I got everyone's order. When I was taking the older gentleman's order, he requested an 8-ounce prime rib. I asked him how he would like it cooked, and he stated, "I want it your color." His wife gleefully laughed as if it was the joke of the century, but I was taken a bit aback. My immediate response was, "So you don't want any pink on it?" I informed my manager this racist remark, and he asked if I wanted to kick them all out. I told him that I would bite the bullet this time, but I wasn't too happy to be serving anyone that would think that was an acceptable answer. I believe they knew they offended me because they ended up leaving me a 30% tip and their tab was over $100. I still felt a little dirty when I smiled at them, but I know taking the high road was the best road, in this case. Story 19. I was called into work one day because they were so busy and needed help badly, so I went in with the clothes I was wearing at home, stupidly not thinking about my nice jeans and shirt. When I arrived, they handed me a fistful of tickets for people who needed drinks and ice cream. I immediately started drilling through the list, getting everything as fast as I could so I could get back home. I took the set of shakes out to a family, and upon giving her the shake she asked for, milky, liquidy shake nonetheless, she throws a fit and totally rages. She pulled the lid off of the cup and threw the shake all over me. I had caramel, hot fudge, milk, and ice cream all over me. I will never do food service again because of this woman. Story 20. I used to work in a deli. I live in California, so there are a lot of Hispanics in service jobs. It was basically me and one other white guy and a fair number of Mexicans and Puerto Ricans. It was kind of in a rich white community, so on occasion I'd see stuff like the following. This one guy who came in who, I think, fancied himself a really nice person. He told the Mexican deli clerk next to me that he wanted 3/4 of the lasagna plate. Well, Mario's English was pretty damn perfect and he was a pretty smart guy. Like any competent person would, he takes the serving spatula and marks off 3/4 of the lasagna dish for the guy. "Is this okay?" he asks. The customer seems troubled. "That's 1/4. I asked for 3/4. Mario not moving. "Yes, sir, 3/4. Customer now using fingers to show numbers. "No, I ordered 3/4. That's 1/4. Mario, now realizing the customer is A, an idiot, and B, assumes the people behind the counter are as stupid as he is, moves the spatula over, now marking off 3/4 from the other side of the dish. "Is this okay, sir?" Customer, "Yes, that's better." Mario and I exchanged eye rolls later. Story 21. I worked at a laser tag center and an indoor amusement park for little kids when I was a teenager. If we weren't busy, then customers could start a 15-minute session right away, but if we were busy, customers would have to leave their name on a list, and then I'd tell them when their session starts. Then I'd call it on the loudspeaker 5 minutes before it's scheduled. So it was a Saturday, midday, the place was packed. A gigantic black woman had a daycare group of at least 20 kids, and she was the only one watching them, so she put her party's name on the list and I told her when their session will start. This time came and her and about 5 of the kids showed up. She told me to wait for the rest of the kids to get there. 20 minutes passed and the next group was in chairs outside the center waiting to play. Another 10 minutes passed and there were less of the gigantic women's children here than there were half an hour ago. I let the next group in and told her that her group will be the first ones in once they're all together. My manager interrupted the game I was attending to send me home. The huge black woman screamed at me for being a racist and allowing people who scheduled the next appointment to have fun playing their game. I quit and went home. Story 22. A well-dressed older man and his family came in for lunch on a Sunday morning, having clearly just come from church. I, being the cook and manager, heard yelling and stepped out to ask if I could help. "I want to speak to your manager," he demanded. "You're looking at him," I reply. "What can I do for you?" "This hussy here," he seethed, pointing at my waitress, "is giving me lip and cold fries. I want to speak to your manager." Apparently, I looked too young to be anyone important, so he just completely lost his temper and threatened me. "I'm gonna make you wish you'd never been born. You better watch your back." "All right, buddy, simmer down," I thought. I then had my waitress call the police and threw him out. What a scene, especially with a completely full house, and I desperately needed to get back to the food I was cooking. What an absolute schmuck, straight out of church no less, and apparently the family patriarch, threatening me over cold fries. The fries were perfectly fine, by the way. His taste buds probably shriveled with spite over the years. Story 23. I dated a girl one time that worked at a Red Lobster in a particularly bad part of town. Most of her stories from when they had the endless shrimp were hilarious, as the restaurant would get packed and everyone would be super happy. But after the promo was over, she had some guy come in and try to order it at the promo price, and after telling him that it was over, and in fact, they were out of shrimp at the moment, he proceeded to yell repeatedly in increasingly high volume, "I want the shrimp, I want the shrimp, I want the shrimp," while spraying stuff all over her in a way that only an obese, poverty-stricken Red Lobster patron could do. Story 24. I was working at Wendy's during lunch hour. Usually I'd be on grill or fries, but this time I was on sandwiches, not my strong suit. This aggressive young businesswoman ordered a junior burger with onions, pickles, and mustard. Okay, I made that, and I was about to put it in the bag when she told me I made it wrong. "You said onions, pickles, and mustard, right? That's what I made." "No, you didn't. You made something different." "Look, ma'am." At this point, my supervisor walks by, tosses my sandwich in the trash, and rapidly makes an identical sandwich. The lady is satisfied. I learned a lesson. The customer is always right if it's lunch hour and the restaurant is packed. Story 25. I was pulled into an intoxicated guy's lap and inappropriately touched. I immediately had them removed from the restaurant. While I work as a server, I am not to be disrespected for any reason. I also had a group of girls waiting for their fifth friend. When she arrived, she ordered a margarita and presented an ID that looked incredibly suspicious. It was covered in tape, broken, smeared, and smudged. I couldn't even clearly make out her face, so I informed her that I would need my manager's approval for an ID that was so badly damaged. She then transformed into a rude and demanding individual. When the manager eventually cleared her ID, she looked at me and sneered, "You can get my drink right now." Throughout the entire ordering process, she continued to make snide comments to her friends like, "Did she check your ID for tape? Better not have an old ID around here." I brought her the margarita and proceeded to give their table the absolute worst service I was capable of. Her friends clearly understood why they were having trouble getting refills, and one of them even apologized to me before they left. However, I wasn't feeling particularly magnanimous. I simply looked at her blankly, then turned around and went to my other tables without saying a word. Story 26. The summer after that ice cream job, my wife and I moved back to New York for our Peace Corps interviews and paperwork. We found a somewhat questionable apartment in Bed-Stuy. I commuted to Harlem to work in a small cafe inside a bookstore on 125th Street. Now the area is changing, but back then I was probably the only white guy staffing the coffee counter at an African-American bookstore in Harlem. Still, everyone genuinely liked me, but 125th Street definitely has its share of eccentric characters. This was my favorite encounter. It was my last week of work. I knew the place inside out, and I was eager to move on. This guy, dressed quite flamboyantly, came in. The following exchange occurred. "Coffee with milk, lots of milk." "What kind of milk? 2%, whole, half and half, skim, soy?" I asked, running through the options. "Mother's milk," he replied calmly. "What?" I asked, a bit taken aback. "Mother's milk." "I don't have mother's milk right now," I told him, trying to keep a straight face. "Oh, you gotta get some. Good for you. If you drink it as a baby, then a man should drink it too. I get mine from my sister. Just keep it around, cereal and whatever. Lots of vitamins in mother's milk, yes." Okay, well, I don't have any back here," I reiterated. Okay, 2% is fine." And off he went, seemingly as happy as could be. Story 27. This isn't something I experienced. I have worked in food service, but something a friend of mine witnessed. He was out with a fairly wealthy friend of his at a very nice restaurant. They had a full meal, drinks, dessert, coffee, etc., and in the end, the bill was pretty high. His friend didn't approve of the level of service he got from the waitstaff, so when the bill came, he paid it with his credit card and left no tip. He did, however, place 9 pennies on the table. When the waiter came back to pick up the check, he saw the pennies stacked there and asked what they were for. The friend responded, "That's your tip because you aren't worth a dime." Oof. Story 28. A family of 5 came into the chain Italian restaurant where I worked while in college. After appetizers, some wine, and food, they had a relatively hefty bill, for this place anyway. When I brought the bill, the wife took it and paid in cash, leaving me a tip of $3 and some change on an $80 bill. The service was good, so I was pretty angry about the tip. A minute later, I noticed the husband and kids standing by the front door, waiting for the wife to use the restroom. I walked up to the man and said, "Excuse me, sir, you forgot your change," and held out the $3. The husband looked at me and said, "Is that all that witch left you?" He then reached in his pocket, pulled out $30 and said, "There you go. Sorry about that." Story 29. Sorry for jumping in, but creating another thread seems like a bit much, and this one really fits my question. Being Danish, we never tip waiting staff at restaurants or bars. It's all included in the price, and they actually get paid a decent wage for their work, so I guess everyone's happy. However, when I'm abroad, I constantly forget to leave tips. Having seen some of your reactions to customers who didn't tip or left too small a tip, I'm starting to fear I might have caused a great deal of frustration for many service workers. I offer my sincerest apologies and a virtual handkerchief for you to dry your eyes. Anyway, do you distinguish between foreigners who might not know the national or regional customs of tipping and locals, or do you just not care? Story 30. Not necessarily rude, but definitely an uncomfortable customer. He's been my customer for about a year and a half now and has gotten more and more attached to me over time. A few months ago, he started watching me for hours at a time as I worked. Finally, he'd walk over to me and tell me how beautiful I am and ask about my love life. I decided to transfer to another store when he started asking me to come over to his place for the weekend because he'd be quote-unquote alone. This guy is at least 30 years older than me. When he found out I was leaving, he grabbed my hair and started to cry. Last night was my first night back to that store. This guy went freaking crazy. He must have sat there smiling at me for half of my shift. My manager knows now, and my husband has the business card he gave me. Story 31. I worked as a cashier in a home improvement store that rhymes with comb, steep, pole. It was a cool job, and I had cool managers until the end. One night, I found myself with a line of 5 to 6 customers, each with a sizable order and with no more available cashiers. I was busting my bum to get them all checked out quickly. When I got to the last person in line, I relaxed slightly and proceeded to scan all of the items. When the lady tried to pay, she wrote out a check that had obviously been printed at home. It wasn't necessarily fake, but we had a policy to not accept computer-printed checks that had recently been re-emphasized. I told the lady such, and she threw a fit. She started yelling at me. She told me that she had to leave because she was already 30 minutes late to pick up her children up in a town that was 30 minutes away. Seriously, now it was my fault that she was late? She accused me of deliberately slowing down and scanning her items as slowly as possible. I tried to calm her down. She didn't. She was raging during all of this. She said something to me like, "Don't you know who I am? You'll never work in this town again." Really? Really? Okay, lady, go. Go do your thing. She yelled at me to get my manager because I still wouldn't accept her check. Remember when I said I had cool managers until the end? The newer assistant manager came up, told me to accept the check. I tried to remind her of the store's policy. She then talked to the lady in front of the store for another 5 minutes or so. Yep, the lady who at this point is at least 45 minutes late for picking up her children. Poor children. After that, the manager comes in, gives me a look, goes back to her office, and promptly comes back with the slip telling me that she's written me up. Yep, we did have cool managers. Until the end, I quit not long after. Story 32. I was a waitress at a Thai restaurant, but I was born and raised in the US. This older lady, who wasn't even my customer, flagged me over to her table to complain about her disgusting dinner, though she still managed to eat 99% of the food on her plate. She then yelled at me for not speaking American good. At another restaurant, I encountered a group of high schoolers. One of them walked directly up to me and said, "Hello, I want fried rice and mugu gai pan," or something similar, mimicking an accent. I glared at him for a good minute before crossing my arms and, in a moment of frustration, responding with exaggerated slang and sounds. His friends started laughing, but the young man simply turned and walked out the door. Story 33. I used to work in a bagel store with some family friends of mine, one of whom was a large, muscular, tattooed Italian guy. He was genuinely a sweetheart, the nicest guy you'd ever meet despite his tough appearance. Anyway, I was probably 18 and he was a couple of years older than me. We were working when we saw a couple we had just served arguing outside through the window. We've had a single table and few chairs in front of the store. As we watched, trying not to interfere, we saw the guy reach across the table and slap the girl in the face. I called to my friend and we both quickly moved from behind the counter and went outside. I told the guy to resolve his problem quickly and that if he ever harmed that girl again, we would intervene. My friend stood behind me, arms crossed, giving him a stern look. The girl thanked us, the guy left, and we let her use the phone. She stayed in the store and ate lunch with us until someone came to pick her up. Story 34. I used to work at Logan's Roadhouse in Austin, Texas, where we kept full buckets of peanuts on the tables. One night, a family came in at 11:05 p.m., just 5 minutes after closing, and my manager seated them in my section. I was fine with serving them, but I had already swept up the peanuts and cleaned my tables. So I politely said, "I hope y'all don't mind, but I've already swept up the peanuts." The man immediately became enraged and yelled, "What the hell do you mean we ain't getting no peanuts? Why the hell do you think we come to this place?" To avoid further confrontation, I quickly said, "It's not a big deal," to which he angrily retorted, "You're darn right it's not." As I walked away, he shouted, "And bring some of those butter rolls while you're at it." The night continued in this challenging manner until he paid, after my manager refused to offer a complimentary meal. Before leaving, he went on a rant about what a terrible server I was, even resorting to insults. On his way out, he deliberately dumped a full bucket of peanuts onto the floor, scuffed them around with his feet, and said, "Have fun cleaning that up, you know what?" He was easily the worst guest I have ever served. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you YouTube things. You're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.